The frontier outpost designated Kepler-7 had exactly one medical facility, and calling it a facility was generous considering it consisted of 3 cramped rooms, equipment that predated most current conflicts, and a human medic who'd stopped expecting adequate supplies around the same time she'd stopped expecting things to make sense. Dr. Aisha Malik had been posted here for 28 months, which meant she developed an impressive ability to improvise solutions using materials that weren't technically designed for medical applications, but could be convinced to serve that purpose anyway. The skirmish had been brief and brutal, the kind of border incident that happened when territorial claims overlapped and nobody wanted to back down first. 2 patrol ships had engaged in what the official reports would probably call an exchange of fire, and what Malik would call a profoundly stupid waste of lives and resources. The result was 14 casualties spread across her limited space, and the triage calculations were the brutal mathematics she'd learned to perform, without allowing emotional attachment to interfere with practical necessity. She moved through the injured with practiced assessment, her hands quick despite exhaustion that made her vision blur occasionally at the edges. Most were human colonists and defense personnel who'd been caught in the crossfire when the skirmish had extended into the outpost's perimeter. But 3 were aliens from various species who'd either been part of the opposing force or had just been in the wrong place when violence decided to visit. Malik didn't particularly care about the distinction. Bleeding was bleeding regardless of political affiliation. The woman in Bay 7 was Theshan, immediately obvious from the elegant bone structure and the pointed ears that rose in graceful curves. She'd been pulled from transport wreckage by recovery teams who'd flagged her as critical and dumped her in Malik's facility, with the kind of urgent efficiency that meant they had other pressing problems elsewhere. Compound fracture in the left leg, bone fragments visible through torn tissue, probable internal bleeding based on abdominal rigidity and vital signs, lacerations across her torso that suggested shrapnel impact at close range, the kind of injury profile that required immediate intervention and more resources than Malik currently had available. She'd stabilized the woman 2 hours ago during the initial triage rush, administered painkillers that were probably compatible with Theshan metabolism based on her limited xenobiology training, and moved on to other casualties because that's what triage meant. You treated based on who would die soonest without intervention, not based on who was suffering most. It was brutal calculus, but it kept more people alive than trying to treat everyone equally when resources were finite. Now, with the immediate life-threatening cases either stabilized or lost to injuries too severe for her limited capabilities, Malik returned to Bay 7 to complete the treatment she'd started. The Theshan woman was conscious now, her eyes tracking Malik's movements with the kind of alert wariness that suggested military training. Malik had seen that look before in soldiers who'd learned to evaluate threat even while injured and vulnerable. "You're awake. That's good news for both of us." Malik pulled up the medical scanner, reviewing vitals that showed improvement from 2 hours ago. The internal bleeding had stopped or at least slowed significantly. The fracture was still a disaster but no longer immediately life-threatening. "The leg needs proper surgical intervention, which I can't provide here, but I can clean and stabilize it enough to get you through evacuation transport. You'll need pins, probably some synthetic bone grafting, definitely physical therapy. But you should recover full function if you follow the rehab protocols." The woman said nothing, just watched with those intense eyes while Malik gathered supplies. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic struggling to cover the underlying scent of blood and burned equipment. Background sounds of other patients and failing life support systems created familiar white noise that Malik had learned to work through. She began cleaning the shrapnel wounds with efficient movements, her hands gentle despite the necessary discomfort of the process. The Theshan woman's breathing hitched with pain, but she made no sound, maintaining silence that spoke of either impressive pain tolerance or cultural conditioning against showing weakness. Malik had treated enough military personnel to recognize both. "You can make noise if it helps," Malik said conversationally while working. "I've had combat veterans cry during splinter removal. Pain is just your nervous system sending information. How you respond doesn't determine your worth as a person or a soldier, or whatever you're measuring yourself against." Still silence, though something shifted in the woman's expression. Malik continued her work, falling into the meditative focus that made treatment easier. Each wound assessed, cleaned, treated with available resources. Each suture placed with precision born from thousands of repetitions under worse conditions than this. The work had its own rhythm independent of who was receiving treatment or why they needed it. "Scarring will be minimal if you follow proper wound care," Malik said, beginning the bandaging process. "Theshan tissue regenerates well with basic support. Keep it clean, don't stress the healing tissue. Let your body do what it's designed to do. You should be fine." She worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from being focused on immediate tasks rather than forcing awkward conversation. The Theshan woman's breathing had stabilized, pain under control from medication, her body beginning to relax as treatment addressed the immediate injuries. Malik finished the final bandage, checking her work with critical eye before nodding satisfaction. "There, you're stable enough for transport. Still need proper surgical facilities for the leg, but you're not going to die in the next 12 hours, which is significant improvement over your condition when you arrived." She made notes on her battered tablet. "Do you need anything? Water? Additional pain medication? I've got nutrition supplements that are supposedly compatible with Theshan metabolism, though I can't personally vouch for the taste." The woman spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the melodic precision of formal Theshan speech. "You didn't ask my name." Malik looked up from her tablet, genuinely puzzled by the observation. "Didn't seem medically relevant. Your Bay 7, compound fracture with internal injuries and shrapnel wounds, currently stable. If you want to provide your name for the official records, that's fine, but treatment doesn't require it." "You didn't ask my rank or military affiliation either. Also not medically relevant. Compound fractures present the same way regardless of who's experiencing them." Malik tilted her head slightly. "Should I have asked? Is there some protocol I'm missing? I tend to skip formalities when people are bleeding." The Theshan woman studied her with an intensity that suggested fundamental reassessment of something. "Most would have asked. Most would have treated me differently based on the answers. I treat everyone according to medical need and available resources. Your rank doesn't change your physiology." Malik checked the IV line, ensuring proper flow. "You'll be evacuated with the other critical cases when transport arrives. Should be another 4 to 6 hours based on last communication from command. Try to rest if you can. Healing works better when you're not fighting exhaustion." She started to move toward the next patient, but the woman's voice stopped her. "Do you know who I am?" Malik turned back, curious now rather than just professionally attentive. "Should I? Are you someone famous I'm supposed to recognize?" For a moment, the Theshan woman just stared at her with an expression that might have been disbelief or possibly suppressed amusement. Then she laughed, a short sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised Malik. "I am Castellan Thura of the 3rd Sovereignty Fleet, commander of military operations in this sector for the past 18 months. The person your colonial defense forces have been fighting against since this territorial dispute began." Malik processed this information, running it against what little she knew of the ongoing conflict. The Castellan was essentially the military authority in this region, someone whose tactical decisions had resulted in most of the casualties Malik had been treating for her entire posting. The person directly responsible for the skirmish that had produced today's disaster. "Okay," she said finally. "Does that change your treatment needs? Do Castellans require different medical procedures than regular soldiers? Because if so, I'm going to need you to explain the physiological differences. Thura's expression cycled through several emotions Malik couldn't quite parse. You're not concerned, not angry. I've commanded operations that have killed your people, caused injuries you've had to treat with inadequate resources. You've commanded operations that resulted in me treating a lot of preventable injuries, yes. But right now you're a patient with compound fracture and shrapnel wounds, and I'm a doctor who took an oath to provide care regardless of who needs it or why they need it. Malik shrugged. Being angry at you won't heal anyone. Being concerned about your rank won't fix your leg. So I'm going to continue doing my job, which is keeping people alive long enough for proper medical intervention. That's remarkably practical. Medicine is remarkably practical when you strip away the politics. Anatomy is just anatomy. Injuries present according to physics and biology, not according to political alignment or military rank. Malik gestured at the other occupied bays around them. I've got soldiers from both sides of this conflict in here right now. They all bleed the same color. They all require the same basic interventions. Their rank and affiliation don't factor into medical necessity. Thura was quiet for a long moment, her eyes tracking Malik's face like she was trying to solve a complex equation. In Theshan culture, rank determines nearly every interaction. How people speak to you, how they approach you, what priority your needs receive. The Castellan is addressed with specific honorifics, treated with formal deference, granted immediate precedence in all situations. That sounds exhausting. It's how our society maintains order. Hierarchy provides structure. Everyone knows their place, their responsibilities, who they answer to. Thura shifted slightly, testing the limits of her injuries. You're genuinely indifferent to my position, aren't you? This isn't strategic positioning or deliberate disrespect. You simply don't care about my rank. I care that you're injured and in pain. I care that the fracture was improperly set initially and will need surgical correction. I care that you're probably not drinking enough water given your blood loss and the strain on your system. Malik pulled up a chair, sitting at eye level rather than standing over the patient. Your political position doesn't change any of those medical realities. So no, I don't particularly care about military rank when I'm trying to keep people from dying. But you're treating me exactly the same way you'd treat any other patient. Yes, that's what medical ethics means in practice rather than just theory. Malik checked her tablet, reviewing the treatment schedule for other patients. Is that problematic? Should I be doing something different because you're important? No, it's just profoundly unusual, disorienting. Thura's voice carried something that might have been wonder mixed with confusion. I can't remember the last time someone interacted with me as a person, rather than as a position. Well, right now you're a person with a badly broken leg, who needs to stay hydrated and follow medical instructions. Everything else is someone else's problem. Malik stood, preparing to check on other patients. I'll be back in about an hour to reassess your pain levels and check those bandages. Call out if anything changes before then. Increased pain, dizziness, nausea, anything that feels wrong. Don't try to tough it out. Information helps me treat you better. She moved on to the next bay, leaving Thura to process their conversation. The other patients required various interventions, medication adjustments, wound redressing, reassurance delivered with the same straightforward competence she'd shown the Castellan. No differentiation based on species or suspected affiliation, just clinical assessment and practical treatment. One of the patients was Theshan, a young soldier who'd been part of the opposing force based on his uniform remnants. Malik treated him with the same careful attention, explaining what she was doing in plain language, ensuring his comfort without performance or excessive formality. The soldier looked confused by the casual interaction, clearly uncertain how to respond to medical care that didn't acknowledge military protocol. "Dr. Malik," Thura called out from her bay, voice carrying command authority even while injured. The soldier in Bay 3 is showing signs of increased respiratory distress. His breathing has become labored in the last few minutes. Malik moved immediately to the indicated patient, pulling up medical data and running quick assessment. Thura was right. The soldier's oxygen saturation was dropping, suggesting fluid accumulation in the lungs. Good catch. I'll adjust his position and increase supplemental oxygen. She made the interventions efficiently. Keep monitoring him if you can see him from your position. Extra observation helps when I'm managing multiple critical patients alone. She said it like Thura was a colleague contributing to medical care, rather than the enemy commander who'd created these casualties. Said it like practical help mattered more than political alignment or military rank. The young Theshan soldier spoke quietly after Malik had stabilized his breathing. Castellan, why are we receiving treatment from humans? Protocol suggests we should be segregated during medical care. The doctor doesn't appear to recognize that protocol. She treats based on medical need regardless of political affiliation. Thura's voice carried something new, not quite approval but perhaps reassessment. It's highly irregular, also highly effective. It seems improper. It saves lives. I'm uncertain whether propriety serves us better than practical medical competence. Thura watched Malik work through the facility, noting the efficient movement, the absence of wasted energy or performative gestures. She's remarkably skilled, possibly more competent than our own field medical personnel, though acknowledging that feels like betraying military loyalty.
Find a different Honda part number. It will work, I promise.
Dude, I know, but I can't find another Honda part number. I just want to get an oil filter. I really don't care right now. I really don't care. I just want to find a fucking oil filter so I can do oil change. I don't care. I don't care if it's fucking K&N. I don't care if it's fucking Mobile One.
Automatics says we need a gym stream.
The hours passed in the suspended time that characterized medical facilities, where urgent necessity coexisted with mandatory patience. Thura dozed occasionally, waking to check on her soldiers and observe Malik's continued treatment rounds. The human doctor worked with relentless focus, pausing only briefly to consume nutrition bars and water that she clearly considered unwelcome interruptions to more important work. During one of these forced breaks, Malik sat near Thura's bay reviewing medical data while mechanically eating something that looked profoundly unappetizing. Thura watched her for a moment before speaking. "You work too hard. You'll compromise your effectiveness through exhaustion." Malik looked up, mildly surprised. Probably accurate, but the alternative is people not receiving necessary treatment, so I'll manage the fatigue. You could delegate basic care tasks to others. To who? I'm the only medical personnel assigned to this outpost. Everyone else has critical responsibilities keeping this place operational. She gestured at the patients around them. This is what frontier medical posting requires. I accepted the assignment knowing the conditions. That's admirable dedication, also profoundly unsustainable long-term. Welcome to frontier medicine. We make it work until we can't. Then we find ways to make it work anyway because injuries don't stop requiring treatment just because the doctor is tired. Malik took another bite of her nutrition bar, made a face suggesting it tasted exactly as bad as it looked, continued eating anyway. I signed up knowing the reality. Can't complain when conditions match expectations. You could have chosen a more comfortable assignment. Better facility, adequate support staff, regular supply shipments. Could have. Chose not to. Frontier outposts need medical personnel, and most doctors prefer assignments where they're not constantly improvising solutions with inadequate resources. Malik's smile carried tired satisfaction. I like the challenge, like knowing that my work here actually matters because nobody else is available to do it. You find meaning in difficulty. I find meaning in work that has clear purpose, save lives, reduce suffering, keep people functional despite injury and illness. Everything else is just logistics and creative problem solving. She finished the nutrition bar, drank water, stood to resume rounds. Purpose makes difficulty bearable. Maybe that's specifically human psychology. I don't know enough about other species to compare, but it works for me. Thura watched her return to work, considering that philosophy. Purpose over comfort. Function over protocol. Results over formal recognition. It was profoundly different from Thesian cultural values, which emphasized proper process, appropriate hierarchy, recognition of rank and status governing every interaction. Yet Malik's approach was undeniably effective. Every patient in the facility was receiving competent care regardless of military affiliation. Resources were allocated based on medical priority rather than political importance. Treatment proceeded with efficient practicality rather than getting entangled in protocol considerations about who deserved precedence. What Thura found most unsettling was how Malik's indifference to rank felt less like disrespect and more like genuine equality. The human doctor treated everyone, enemy commanders, allied soldiers, unknown civilians, with identical straightforward competence. She recognized medical need, responded to suffering, provided care without allowing status or affiliation to alter her fundamental approach. It was profoundly destabilizing to someone raised in a culture where rank determined value and hierarchy structured every social interaction, where the Castellan's needs automatically took precedence over everyone else's, where proper deference was expected, and its absence indicated either ignorance or deliberate insult. Malik wasn't ignorant and wasn't insulting. She was simply operating from completely different assumptions about how value worked and what mattered during crisis. The evacuation transport arrived during hour 8, bringing proper medical supplies and personnel to handle transfer of critical patients to facilities with surgical capabilities. Malik coordinated the evacuation with brisk efficiency, ensuring each patient was stable for transport and providing detailed documentation to the incoming medical team. Thura watched the organized chaos, her own transfer being prepared by 2 Thesian medics who treated her with elaborate deference that felt strange after hours of Malik's casual competence. They used proper honorifics, maintained appropriate hierarchical distance, ensured her comfort with almost performative care. The Castellan requires immediate priority transport, one was saying to the evacuation coordinator. Her rank demands precedence over other casualties, regardless of their medical status. Malik's voice cut through the discussion with unexpected authority. The Castellan requires transport based on medical priority, which currently places her third in the evacuation sequence. The 2 patients ahead of her have more critical conditions and less stable status. Rank doesn't alter triage protocols. The Thesian medic looked genuinely scandalized. Doctor, you cannot possibly suggest that the Castellan should wait, while lower-ranked personnel receive priority. I can and I am suggesting exactly that. Medical evacuation follows medical necessity, not political hierarchy. The Castellan is stable, the others aren't. They transport first. Malik's tone carried finality. If you have concerns about protocol, file them with your command structure after we've ensured everyone survives the transport process. The medics looked to Thura, clearly expecting her to override this human doctor's outrageous disregard for proper precedence. Thura surprised herself, and possibly everyone else, by supporting Malik's assessment. The doctor's triage judgment is medically sound. Proceed with priority sequencing based on medical necessity rather than rank-based allocation. She met the scandalized expressions with calm authority. My injuries are stable. Others require immediate intervention. That's the relevant calculation here. After the medics reluctantly accepted this decision and moved to prepare other patients, Malik approached Thura's bay one final time. Thank you for supporting the medical assessment. Some commanding officers would have insisted on rank precedence regardless of actual medical need. Some commanding officers haven't spent 8 hours watching you work. Competence earns trust in judgment. Thorough studied the human doctor's face, noting exhaustion carefully controlled but definitely present. Will you rest once evacuation is complete? Will I sleep for 16 hours and wake up questioning my life choices? Probably. Will I actually rest properly? Unlikely. There's cleanup, restocking, documentation, and approximately 40 other tasks requiring attention. Malik managed a tired smile. But I appreciate the concern. Not everyone bothers asking. I've noticed you receive minimal recognition for your work. Your command structure should acknowledge your competence more formally. Recognition doesn't heal people. Competence does. I'm satisfied with the latter being sufficient. Malik checked Thurah's vitals one final time. You'll reach proper surgical facilities within 3 hours. The leg will need pins, possibly synthetic bone grafting, but you should recover full functionality. Follow rehabilitation protocols even when they're tedious and frustrating. Is that medical advice or It was said lightly, without accusation, but the reminder of Thurah's role in creating these injuries landed with uncomfortable weight. I'll consider that perspective in future strategic planning. Though military decisions rarely account adequately for medical consequences. No, they don't. Which is why people like me exist, to manage the aftermath and try to keep everyone alive despite decisions made by people like you. Malik's tone remained matter-of-fact rather than bitter. It's not personal. It's just the reality of military conflict. Commanders make strategic choices. Medics handle the medical consequences. We all have our roles in this system. The evacuation team returned to begin Thurah's transfer. As they carefully moved her onto the transport stretcher, she caught Malik's attention one more time. Doctor, in Theshan culture, we have a concept called Keelith, formal recognition of someone who has provided service beyond reasonable expectation or obligation. You've treated me and my soldiers with skill and care despite our being your enemy. That merits proper acknowledgement. Malik looked genuinely uncomfortable. I just did my job. You don't need to make it ceremonial. Nevertheless, I will ensure appropriate recognition reaches your command structure. What you've demonstrated here, genuine equality of care, competence delivered without regard to political alignment, medical ethics maintained under difficult circumstances, deserves formal acknowledgement whether you seek it or not. If it makes you feel better, sure. But I'd prefer better medical supplies and maybe some additional personnel. Recognition is nice, but resources save lives. Malik stepped back as the transport team prepared to move. Safe travels, Castellan. Try to stay out of situations requiring emergency medical intervention. As they carried her toward the transport ship, Thurah found herself reflecting on the past 8 hours with something approaching profound cognitive dissonance. She'd been treated with genuine equality by someone who had every justification to treat her as an enemy. Had received competent medical care from a doctor who'd refused to allow rank or military affiliation to alter her fundamental approach to helping people. In Theshan society, such indifference to hierarchy was nearly incomprehensible. Position determined value, rank structured interaction. The Castellan received deference automatically because that's how social order functioned. Yet Malik had demonstrated it wasn't disrespect or cultural ignorance. It was a completely different understanding of how value worked. One that prioritized competence over ceremony, practical help over formal recognition, individual medical need over political status. Thurah spent her surgical recovery in a Theshan military medical facility that was everything Kepler-7 wasn't, properly equipped, adequately staffed, following every protocol with meticulous precision. The doctors treating her were competent and appropriately deferential, using proper honorifics, ensuring she received priority care, maintaining correct hierarchical distance. It felt hollow compared to Malik's straightforward competence. The surgery was successful, rehabilitation protocols established. She followed them with disciplined focus, driven partly by Malik's warning about inadequate recovery and partly by newfound awareness of how medical consequences extended from strategic decisions. Each painful therapy session reminded her of the human doctor working with inadequate resources to repair damage that Thura's commands had helped create. Her second-in-command, Admiral Kesseth, visited during the third week of recovery to discuss operational matters. They reviewed fleet positioning, strategic assessments, political developments, the usual briefings that continued regardless of Thura's temporary medical limitations. But Kesseth noticed something different. You've changed since Kepler-7. More contemplative. The medical team reports optimal recovery progress, but something fundamental has shifted in your command approach. Thura considered how to articulate what she was still processing. I was treated by a human doctor during the evacuation. Her approach to medical care was profoundly instructive. Instructive how? Did she provide intelligence about human capabilities? No. She provided perspective on how humans view hierarchy and authority, specifically how they don't, or at least how some don't. Thura adjusted her position carefully. She treated me without deference, Kesseth, not as deliberate disrespect or strategic positioning, but as genuine indifference to my rank. I was simply a patient requiring medical intervention, no different from any other injured person in her facility. But Kesseth looked genuinely troubled. That's profoundly inappropriate. The Castellan deserves proper recognition. I received proper treatment. Competent, thorough medical care delivered with practiced expertise. What I didn't receive was performance of deference or alteration of approach based on my position. Thura met her second's eyes. It was the most genuinely respectful interaction I've experienced in years, precisely because it treated me as a person rather than as a rank. But I don't understand that perspective. Neither did I initially. But consider, every interaction we have is filtered through rank awareness. People speak to me carefully, treat me with formal distance, modify their behavior based on my position. Even you, despite our long professional relationship, maintain appropriate hierarchical separation. Thura gestured at the medical facility around them. These doctors are competent, but they're performing competence for the Castellan, rather than simply providing medical care for an injured person. The difference is subtle but significant. Kesseth was quiet for a moment. You're suggesting human indifference to hierarchy is superior to our cultural structure. I'm suggesting it provides something we lack. The ability to interact with individuals rather than positions. The human doctor saw someone injured who needed help. She provided that help efficiently and compassionately, unaltered by my political position or military role. That created a form of genuine equality our culture struggles to achieve. But equality can destabilize necessary command structures, or it reveals that command structure built entirely on hierarchical deference is more fragile than we'd prefer to believe. Thura tested her healing leg's range of motion. I've been reconsidering our strategic approach in this sector. The conflict that produced Kepler-7's casualties achieved minimal strategic gain while consuming resources and lives on both sides. Meanwhile, a single human doctor with inadequate supplies demonstrated more effective leadership through competent service than I've shown through formal command authority. But over the following months, Thura pursued diplomatic resolution rather than continued military escalation. The negotiations were difficult, complicated by entrenched positions and mutual distrust, but she approached them with revised understanding. That genuine authority came from service rather than status, that treating people as individuals rather than positions produced better outcomes than maintaining rigid hierarchy. She didn't mention Malik by name in official negotiations, but she thought about that human doctor often, about straightforward competence delivered without performance. about care provided regardless of political alignment, about the radical equality of treating everyone according to need rather than status. The final treaty included provisions for medical cooperation, resource sharing for frontier facilities, explicit recognition that some human values, like equality of care regardless of rank, had merit worth incorporating into Thetan practice. Thura sent a brief message to Malik. Treaty signed. Your facility should receive upgraded equipment within 2 months. Thank you for demonstrating that service matters more than ceremony. Castellan Thura. The response came a week later, equally brief. Equipment arrived early, already saving lives. Try not to create more casualties. Dr. Malik. Thura smiled at the casual irreverence, the refusal to acknowledge rank even in written communication. It was exactly what she'd come to value, that unwavering commitment to treating everyone as people rather than positions. She returned to her duties with revised understanding of what command meant, still making strategic decisions, still bearing responsibility for lives affected by her choices, but now approaching leadership as service rather than status, as competence applied for others' benefit rather than performance of authority for its own sake. Sometimes the most profound revolutions began in understaffed medical facilities, where tired doctors treated compound fractures without caring who needed treatment. Only that treatment was needed. Genuine equality, Thura had learned, wasn't about eliminating hierarchy. It was about recognizing that rank didn't determine human